But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back and thanks for staying with us. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust TV. It's now time for the newspaper review. Now, let's take a look at the front page of Daily Trust newspaper. The lead story here says, high costs hinder consumers' access to electricity meters. Writers here says only 38% of 12.6 million registered customers have meters. We were given second-hand meters with accumulated bills. Experts push for free meters. NERC says soon, and you can find details of that story on page 4. Now below the story is a pictorial of motorists queuing at fuel station as scarcity worsens in parts of the Federal Capital Territory yesterday. Now at the top of the page there we have 20th Daily Trust Dialogue, experts to analyze presidential candidates' promises. Details on page 3. Flight delays, theft top list as aviation ranks third in FCC PC 2022 complaints. 148 passengers unhurt as Itakpe-Warri line derails. Now, on the footnotes there, we have Buhari commissions $1.5 billion Lekki Deep Seaport, other projects today. Dozens flee as bandits raid Niger communities on page 6. And then blind man, leper, arrested with hemp in Osun, Kano states. These are some of the stories on Daily Trust newspaper.
All right, next we'll take a look at the Punch newspaper, which carries this major story on the front page. Banks battle a new naira shortage ahead of deadline. And as writers here, it says Lagos FCT states ATMs dispense old notes as January 31 deadline nears. CBN begins currency swap for rural unbanked Nigerians, and stakeholders foresee extension. Customers want CBN to shift ground. Still talking about front page of Punch newspaper. Passengers stranded in forest as Warri Itakpe train derails. And talking politics now, MKB Abiola's wife sues IG, demands 100 billion naira. Diphtheria spreads to Lagos, NCDC monitors Osun Yobe. Chatham House pilgrimage, Nigerian politicians seek relevance in foreign land. And towards the top of the front page there, PSC asks FG to stop 10,000 constables' salaries. Petrol may hit 800 naira per litre on subsidy removal. This is according to marketers. And interest rate hike likely as MPC meets today. And right beside the nameplate there, sacked UI female lecturer petitions Senate VC summoned. Details of that story can be found on page 40. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning.
All right, up next is This Day newspaper. At the top of the page there we have Atiku campaign wants NDLEA, EFCC to arrest, prosecute Tinubu over drugs, allegations of money laundering. And we also have writers that says accuses former Lagos governor of looting state's treasury. Atiku lacks character to be Nigeria's president. APC fires back. Now, more stories. Ahead of Buhari's inauguration, first commercial vessel berths at $1.5 billion Lekki Deep Seaport. CBN harps on adoption of digital banking channels, moves against banks loading old notes. Details on page 8. Tonye call to Buhari, declare state of emergency in Rivers, traces violence to executive orders 21 and 22. The big story here talks about PSC. IG posting commissioners without our clearance is unconstitutional. Fears collusion with governors, says authority to assign commissioners resides with commission. Now, we also have one on the footnote there. Ayade, only Tinubu can fix Nigeria as Buhari leads Bauchi rally today. These are some of the stories on This Day newspaper.
All right, next we'll take a look at The Guardian. It carries this major story on the front page. Cash swap program takes off nationwide, 1 week to deadline. And that is talking about the new bank notes. And in riders here that says banks yet to heed CBN's directive, stock ATMs with old bank notes. Buni begs for extension, says only 4 out of 17 councils have banks in Yobe. Zulum decries dispensation of new notes in Borno. No cause for alarm over deadline, CBN says, and new notes surface in Anambra banks after threats by CBN. Going towards the bottom of the front page there, experts predict improved performance in H2 ahead of MPC meeting, and Nigeria to reactivate isolation centers over outbreak of COVID-19, deadly flu in China. And towards the top of the front page there, 20 African heads of state, private investors meet in Dakar for food security. APC presidential campaigner Muhammad declares support for Atiku. Other parties. Details of that can be found on page 30. Passengers stranded as train derails in Kogi, and Bello strongly behind Tinubu, says Kogi APC. Details of that can be found on page 30 as well. And these are the major stories on the front page of The Guardian newspaper this morning.
All right, let's take a look at Business Day newspaper. Nigeria's spend on defense rises, but security elusive. Now, that's a big story there. Says investment in weapon training spurs fight against insurgency, fighting the enemy through loans. We also have more stories. What CBN's 22.7 trillion naira overdraft to debt means for the economy. Oil companies lose 803 billion naira to sabotaged pipelines. And we also have cash withdrawal limits seen threatening food production. And these are some of the stories on Business Day newspaper.
All right, that's it for reading out the headlines right now at this moment on Daybreak this morning. So we're going to jump straight into the analysis of the headlines that we've just reeled out. And of course, in the studio, we have Mukhtar Suleiman to help us with that. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
It's a beautiful Monday morning.
Yes, it's one of those days. You wake up before 7 a.m.
Exactly. After the relaxation of the weekend, you have to have an
you get so accustomed to the weekend, and then Sunday just creeps up on you.
Exactly.
I remind you that Monday
is coming. Monday is just creeping around the corner.
I just remember that that skit by Lasisi where he said, "Poverty sat me down on a Saturday morning."
All right. Well, welcome to Daybreak this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right.
All right, so let's take a look at the stories on front page of Daily Trust. First, the lead story here talks about the high cost, of electricity meters hindering consumers' access. What's your take on this? Because we have people saying that they're even given second-hand meters with accumulated bills.
I've always said this whole issue with the prepaid meter system has had that we've not really gotten it right since when it was introduced. Back in 2015, way before then. I think it was way before then. I think 2012 or 2010 thereabouts. We've not really gotten it right. There's always been one issue to the other. It seems as if the power holding company is not actually learning from anything. I don't even know what to call them anymore. That is power holding, or that is ABC.
It's power.
Yeah, it's like we're not learning anything. Ministry of Power, let me even put it that way. Let me put that responsibility to them, because at the beginning it was scarcity of the meter. Then there was backdoor selling of the meter due to the scarcity, even from people in the NEPA office. Let's call it what every Nigerian calls it. And then now it's now going into, now it's not even available. Sorry, it's available, but it's necessarily expensive. And then you go to buy second-hand. Why should second-hand meters even be for sale? And even if they are for sale, it should be like the way you buy a second-hand car, directly from the buyer, and there should be transfer of ownership from one user to the other user. It shouldn't be that you go back to the NEPA office to buy a second-hand meter. That doesn't speak well of our own policing system of that electricity distribution sector. But I hope we do get it better. Like I said, it seems as if we're not learning from the past. We keep doing the same thing over and over, and like it has actually been stated, madness is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So we actually need to change our approach that we actually use for this thing actually.
Well, there seem to be some controversy surrounding the power sector recently. I mean, like there's been talks of a price increase in tariff. There's an increase in tariff. People are actually saying that they have seen the increase themselves because they go to buy these things. The NERC is keeping mum about it. The ministry, the power ministry, is saying that you should talk to NERC. The NERC is keeping quiet, whereas people are actually saying that there's an increase in the tariff as well.
I worked for a little while in one of the electricity agencies last year from January to August. Yeah, from January to August, and I got to see firsthand, in a manner of speaking, how the electricity sector, how the power sector actually works. Now, beyond even the power sector, we've had this incident with how the government keeps very silent about changing price because they don't want to take responsibility. They feel like keeping quiet means that they're not taking responsibility. There will be no bashing, which is sometimes the case because Nigerians notice this thing, and because we did not see it in the news. Realistically, we are buying this thing at this rate, but because we are not seeing it in the news, then everybody just keeps quiet about it, which is not. We shouldn't be. We should actually be able to speak up about most of these things. It's why I'm really happy. I attended the second reading of the Electricity Power Sector Reform Act, the EPSRA, and one of the things that they were looking at doing is to decentralize the power of the NERC. The NIRC is the only regulatory body of the power sector in the whole country. They're trying to contextualize it to states and see how states can set up their own regulatory bodies to contextualize or domesticate the NIRC regulation policy. And the NIRC can serve as a parent body.
What difference will that make?
Well, it sort of gives states the autonomy to pick and choose what makes sense for them. Because the way you would regulate electricity in Lagos cannot be the same way you regulate electricity in Jigawa, because the power consumption are completely different. These are things that you actually have to put into context. Wouldn't that be more
effective in a situation whereby these states are actually generating their own power?
Exactly.
I would agree with you, but then again, not all states have the capacity to generate its own power. Niger State, that generates the power for most of the power for the country, does not have light. I lived in Mina. Niger State does not have light.
It's quite ironic.
Very ironic. I can sit down here right now and count how many places have the 33 are plugged into the 33 kVA. I can list them for you right now, seated here, except they've added some between last year and this year I'm not aware of. So it is really sickening. So even at the point of saying, generate power for each state to generate their own power, I think it transcends that. I think we need to actually look into gas as a way of generating power and find a way to maintain it. It's what when I lived in Egypt for a little while, and it's one of the things I got to notice about it. We toured around, went to the Suez Canal, went to their power company, the place that Peter Obi went the other time, and I got to see firsthand how they generate their own power as well. This is a country that has suffered two revolutions in the last decade. Between 2010 and 2020, they suffered two revolutions, the Morsi and Mubarak revolution. And if you go there, it does not look like they actually had any issue. There's a stable power there, and we actually need to look at how we can, because it's sickening for me that with the Ukraine crisis and the shortage of gas supply, because Ukraine supplies most of Russia supplies most of Europe its gas, Nigeria could not plug into that market, despite the fact that we actually have the crude here, we have the means of refining, and we have the means of transporting.
Okay. Now that we're done with electricity and power, let's move on to petrol.
Of course.
Yes. Now, as okay, so now the queues have resurfaced. The prices have increased. What's your thought on it?
It's the same thing we're even actually saying. I didn't want to actually preempt it. The filling station went to buy fuel, said it was standard now 200 naira per liter.
Oh.
Yeah, that everybody's selling at 200 naira. Now should go and ask NNPC or whoever I want to go and ask. That's the standard price now everybody's selling. Most that's the benchmark for most filling stations. Is 200 naira per liter, which I found very appalling. Now it's weird because you have a government who is very nonchalant about the plight of the citizens, and you have capitalists within the system who are taking advantage of that issue, ensuring that lives are becoming just for the I won't say it's for personal benefit, really, because it's difficult to actually pin it on that. We know what the global situation is about petrol and gas currently. We know what the global situation is about the economic turmoil the world is facing. But if you look at the realistic tenets of Nigeria, variables that actually operate in Nigeria, with how much money is being embezzled, with how much money we say is being lost to theft, how much barrels of liters are being lost to theft, imagine if all of it had been managed properly. Like we're suffering at almost the same level as other countries, despite this global economic turmoil. Imagine if we were managing our own well enough as most of these countries. That means we would actually have one of the strongest economies in the world currently. I think we need to really do a reality check, honestly.
Well, you said the fuel station telling you that it's now 200 naira
Yes,
per litre officially.
confidently.
There is a story that we actually read on I think it's the Punch newspaper, that the marketers are saying that with removal of subsidy, that fuel price can move up to 800 naira per litre.
Yes.
How realistic will that be for Nigeria?
Honestly, I've always said what my position is here about fuel subsidy. I have no problem with the removal of fuel subsidy. In fact, I think it should be removed. But this is the flip side. If you're going to remove fuel subsidy, make sure that there's stable power in the country. Make sure there's an effective and efficient inter and intra-state transport network. Just to make sure that whoever is going to go buy fuel at 800 naira per litre is going to go and buy it because they want to drive their cars, and we know that driving your car is a luxury. Not because if I'm going to pay 800 naira to generate primary source of power, which is supposed to be a basic amenity, then the government is still stealing from us. It's still theft. You might as well just put a gun to our head and just tell us to give you everything that we have. Imagine if I have to pay 800 naira per litre as a business person that generates a little over, if you cut down my income, my inflow, let's say it's around 2,000 naira per day I'm making my business, if you break it down, and then I have to generate 800 naira per litre. 800 naira per litre is already taking almost 60% of the money.
That's assuming you use just 1 litre.
About 40 litres, even assuming you use only just 1 litre.
Exactly.
And sometimes you only have light in the, say for some areas, you only have light for 6 hours in a day. So it's just rather appalling.
So some things need to be put in place.
Some things need to be put in place before you say you want to remove fuel subsidy. I don't think you should. The fuel subsidy system is one of the greatest structural thieving system in the country. It should be removed. I agree that it should be removed. But before you do that, make sure that these things are in place so that the common man is not affected. Local man does not have to think of how to go and start buying fuel at 800 naira to make sure that there is light for me to iron my clothes or for me to do other things. So honestly, I think because we were so quick, the government is so quick to say, oh, don't you see Saudi Arabia, oh, don't you see other countries? But you're forgetting that there are other variables and structures in place that make sure that the citizens are not crying about it. Do your own part. When you do your own part, it's easier for other people to actually fall in line.
All right, let's take a look at still the newspaper Daily Trust on page 12. We have the opinion here talking about Northern Borno, a deprived region of Nigeria. It talks about how despite efforts of governments and NGOs, hunger and disease are still rampant in the area and children are particularly impacted, and it seems the future is uncertain for them. And then we also have an editorial on probing outgoing governors, 5.8 trillion naira debts. And if you go to City and Crime, you have stories here. Police shoot man to death in Kano. 2 laborers die in pit toilet. We also have alleged defamation. MKO Abiola's widow slams 100 billion naira suit against police. Others. Kidnapping. DSS testifies against Serkin Fulani of Kwara. We have Futa student commits suicide. Cleric absconds with woman's 30 million naira jewelry in Kwara State. Nurse daughter abducted in Abuja regain freedom. And we have Abuja. We have 2 arrested for kidnapping herdsmen in Ogun State. Abuja. We also have in crime, blind man, leper arrested with hemp in Osun and Kano States. And then Abuja Kaduna train attack suspect nabbed, which is a good one here. But then we still have 148 passengers unhurt as Itakpe Warri train derails. And it seems a lot of people, are beginning to lose faith in the train system, the rail system.
Before we even get into the rail system, there's a story you read earlier about one of the crime stories you read. If you don't mind going back,
okay.
I just lost it just now in my head. There's the first one, the earliest one you read. Okay, about the hunger in Jigawa and the rest of it.
In Borno State.
Is Borno?
Yes.
Yeah.
Northern Borno.
Yeah. The problem with NGO approach is that I've always found. I work in the NGO space. But one of the lapses we have is the idea of sustainability in our approach. toward interventions. I was having a conversation I was in Morocco in December, and I was having a conversation with someone from the Dangote Foundation. I think they're working, I don't speak to most of what they are doing anyway, because it's not my organization, I don't speak for them. But she was telling me about an interesting project they were working on nutrition, which we had a very extensive conversation around what should be done or what could be done to ensure that there's sustainability in these things. Because it's one thing to go to those communities and share money or share food, but that doesn't really alleviate the issue. It doesn't really. So the best thing you can do is set up structures, help them set up structures, give them the capital, ensure that there's a strong financing system. You do an oversight for maybe 5 to 10 years to ensure that, oh, that thing is actually sustainable before you hand it over to them fully. And then if you do that continuously, repetitively, there are other project ideas, even though some of them that were implemented back in the day, I think back in school, which actually till date are still actually operational. So we need to ensure that sustainability is at the fore of most of our interventions. So beyond that, business models have to come in. You have to find a way to integrate business models into most of the way our interventions actually work. So that's actually one way to actually go about alleviating the issue of nutrition in most of those places. Because there are conspiracy people who argue that as far as there's humanitarian presence anywhere, it's very difficult to actually deal with the issue because some people are making money
out of it
from that issue.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing with Borno. If, for instance, you curb the issue of Boko Haram, those organizations whose base of founding is on peace and conflict, what do they do? What do they jump into? So it's really, really tricky, especially if you're in the health sector. If you see the health sector, the development sector, the health sector in the development space, it's actually, there are a plethora of things going on there that when you look into it properly, you wonder if this is the same Nigeria we are in. But then coming back to the train, the Abuja Kaduna train incident is actually good that we've nabbed some suspects. Hopefully, I've not taken the train since, not because of PTSD anyway. I've not had any reason to go to Kaduna. I have not had any reason to go to Kaduna yet. But I understand that it looks safer than before. I hope so, because before it looked very safe. You always see the armed guards and everybody else. Then the Warri to Itakpe, I have found that is one of the most, what's the term they use for this thing? Like, they don't take care of that train system. Abuja Kaduna is even better. There is maintenance and whatnot, but Itakpe to Warri, it is just abandoned. So people just take it the way they like. I heard that they stop on the road to carry passengers.
Okay. That report as well.
Because my family lives in Warri. My hometown is Okene, so they come a lot. They go and come a lot from those places. So my mom, they told me there was one time they stopped to carry passengers. They kept stopping and stopping to carry passengers as if it was a bus, which is a very sad thing to actually note. So I really hope that they really improve in most of these things, because now for a train to derail, I was reading about the magnetic force that is used for train lines. For a train to derail, it's one of the most difficult things. It's why it is one of the safest ways of traveling. So for it to just derail on its own shows that there's poor maintenance, like terribly poor maintenance, and that needs to change. More needs to be done to improve this. This is the same thing we're talking about, inter-interstate transport networks. These things have actually been helping, especially in terms of goods carried and whatnot. Because the road from Okene to Warri, by the time you get to the Auchi axis, it's really, really bad. In fact, it's been 5 years since I traveled by that road. 6 years since I traveled by that road. And then it was really bad. And no maintenance now. You can imagine how it is now. The road will don't come off a road. So we really need to do a lot more to improve most of those things.
All right, let's take the lead story on Punch newspaper, talking about banks battling new Naira shortage ahead a deadline. Now we have the CBN saying that customers should reject old notes from banks and banks should come and pick up new notes, and there's a whole confusion.
Now, what I'm about to say is a hearsay, he say, who say said situation. But I remember that I was reading an article where one of the issues that was pointed out by the banks is that the ATM machines, the ATMs were not recognizing the new Naira notes. There was an issue with, but I think that's a lie. because Lotus Bank ATMs are actually dispensing the new Naira notes. I don't know about other banks, but I know particularly about Lotus. So even if you do tell me that that's the issue, reprogramming your ATM should not take you as long as it has been taking most banks. So most banks actually don't want this policy to actually come in place. This is like a power play between them, having the backing of the politicians against the CBN. Again, it's he said, she said, not confirmed. This is the story I was told anyway. So there is that issue going on, that friction going on, thinking that, oh, if they delay it as much as they do, the public pressure push the CBN to extend
the deadline,
which is something that the CBN is trying not to cave from. The banks are giving back those old Naira notes, knowing that they have that political backing. And moreover, since the CBN policy insists that one of the other issues that the banks have problem with is CBN policy insisting that the highest denomination to be on the ATM should be 200 Naira. They don't like that idea because then it means that they will have to keep rolling over money into. Imagine putting 20,000 Naira of 200 Naira notes in your wallet. But we all know that what the CBN is trying to do is to reduce cash flow. So that means you will not want to go to the ATM to withdraw 20,000 Naira. Instead, you want to transfer it to whoever it is that you need to pay with that money. So I think the CBN policy is actually a very good policy, honestly. And I find that it's going to help with dealing with issues around illicit financial flow during the election financing. So if that be the case, it should get public support. Of course, there's going to be pushbacks like this, but I didn't expect the pushbacks to be from within the actors of the same sector who understands what these things are. I have a friend that works in a bank that was telling me that if we really want to deal with corruption in the country, most banks will go down completely, because banks are enablers of most of these issues. They're the ones who help to clean the money up. They're as in openly even, they're the ones who do the whole sorting and arrangements and whatnot. So that needs to be checked by, hopefully we can get a stronger government that would have the strong will, irrespective of what happens, to ensure that they can actually deal with most of these issues.
All right, that's quite a scary prospect when you look at it. Well, that's on that note, we'll drop the discussion right now on the headlines on the newspapers. Mukhtar Suleiman, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
To giving us these insights and, of course, these interesting perspectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so that's been the newspaper review this morning on Daybreak. We'll take a short break, and when we return, top of the hour, the show continues. Just stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that